Hi, so today we're going to be talking to someone quite exciting. Corey Haines, the founder of Swipe Files, has done so much of exciting stuff, and we want to dive in and talk all about content. What what do you need to do to be a good writer? What makes a good email? What should be in a good blog? So we'll just dive right into it, because I know product marketers, writing is just one of those core skills that you just unfortunately have to be good at. For me, so this is like a masterclass for me. So I'm so glad to have you on today, Corey.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really exciting stuff. I always enjoy it and appreciate the invite.
Yeah, of course. I actually just want to get right into it, Corey. To start off with, I know you have an amazing profile, being like head of growth at Barometrics, and then also leading the whole content effort as well. But just to get started right now at Swipe Files, tell me, how does Swipe Files really work? I know it's like a community for marketers and all, but tell me what it's all about. How do you identify what's the right thing to put out there so you get people like me excited about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It started really as two courses that I created, which were both born out of a lot of conversations with other marketers about what they needed help with and what was working. And so the first one was mental models for marketing, and that was really about sort of how to be strategic and how to think through and be like a problem solver in marketing, rather than just like a copy paster on different things you read about in blog posts and what you see your competitors doing.
Yeah.
And then the second one's called Refactoring Growth, and that one's really kind of really packaged everything that I had learned in basically like B2B SaaS growth, growing Barometrics, as well as being able to talk to 10 to 20 founders a week for 2 years, and being able to sort of see the innards and metrics of thousands of SaaS companies and learning what works and doesn't work, and all the different dynamics of how you grow as a SaaS company. And then I created a weekly newsletter that was basically kind of like these teardowns and like annotated kind of commentary on landing pages, ads, emails. That was also born out of my experience from Barometrics, because we were spinning up our affiliate program, and I was like, what goes on a landing page to recruit affiliate partners to promote the affiliate program? And so then went and, did a whole bunch of studying, asked people, went around. I was like, I wish, this existed for like any other thing that I need to spin up, because I don't want to, try to like guess my way through it or like try to reinvent the wheel, but also like it takes a lot of work to do this for the first time. And so I'd rather just like learn through example. And then I introduced the community part. And now I'm sort of like, it's always a work in progress, right? But now I'm putting all those things together into a single membership, where there's the community, there's the courses, everything's very focused around SaaS marketing now, especially. And so I'll just trying to give like really tangible examples of what I'm doing, what other people are doing, what's working, and a framework to grow your SaaS business.
Okay, cool. So I picked up that mental models is a topic that, that's kind of like highlighted in Swipe Files as well. So just like that, how do you know that is going to be, like something that marketers are going to be excited about? How do you decide what works?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because I think what the mistake that a lot of people make, including ourselves as marketers, is that we, or even as makers, as product people, is that you create something and then you sort of like go into a cave and you work on it for a long time, and then you come back out and you say, look what I built, and then it might be crickets, right? And sort of you're waiting for people to come and tell you how great this thing is, but you might not have built the right thing, right? Or you might not have tailored it exactly to what they need. And so really what I've been doing for the past couple of months is really doing a lot of exploration, trying to get feedback from other sort of peers and mentors and advisors. And so I'm a part of a creator mastermind that's been really, really valuable and honest and critical in some ways and in very good ways. Talking to Swipe Files members currently and asking, hey, does it make sense for Swipe Files to be sort of marketing in general, or to really focus in on SaaS marketing? And turns out people really care about the SaaS marketing aspect. Also just the content that I put out in the past. I think I'm trying to play to my superpowers, and a lot of my experience and expertise is in SaaS. And so I can just create content a lot better for that space than for e-commerce or for digital products or other things, because I don't have that competence, right? I want to stay in my circle of competence, which is one of the mental models that we talk about in the course and in the membership. So yeah, I think it's a lot of it's just like trying to be a truth seeker. We're really trying to do your due diligence on getting feedback, having a sounding board, and then involving people in the process rather than just like making a decision and then going and showing the results of that decision much later. You really want to loop people in and be iterative rather than like making these big hard pivots.
I really like that, because what I kind of heard was talking to basically the people that you are addressing, because they know what they're looking for, and also playing to your strengths. Because and I suppose it's like the best combination. I like what you said about, you know, how people think you build a good product, they'll come. Kind of need to talk about what's relevant about it and how it solves like a pain point, right? So you did mention like, you know, like having a newsletter and all of those things. So if we were to kind of dive into about like writing specifically about like newsletters and stuff, what makes a good email? Like what would be like the skeleton of something that's good that people would want to read?
Yeah, there's a lot packed in to writing. I mean, it really can sort of be boiled down into like a few basic principles. Even any one of those can be extrapolated and expanded upon into a whole bunch of other, you know, sub bullet points. But for me, I'll just speak to like what's worked for me and what I've kind of learned through the process is that writing is really an exercise of communicating in a way that resonates with people. And so you can write in a way that's very like descriptive and literal and like checks the boxes for like what you did, but it might not capture people's attention. It might not get them to click or to take action. It might not, you know, read well. It might just like sound kind of boring, and people won't feel very inspired by it or very connected with it. They don't have an emotional attachment to it. There's no personality. Maybe it sounds like it's a robot, right? So I think one of the big parts that I always start with is what's the hook? What's the kind of like promise of the thing that I'm writing? The thing that I'm ultimately trying to get people to. I think that a mistake that a lot of people make across landing pages, emails, ads, a whole bunch of other, like anything that you're putting in front of someone trying to get a reaction, is that they have multiple goals for one unit of a message, you know, one landing page, one email, one ad. Simply by, you know, getting it down to one thing. What is the one thing that I want someone to do with this? Your job becomes a lot easier, because then everything drives to that one action, to that one promise. Now the subject line, instead of it saying, you know, something about X, Y, and Z and sort of like all over the place, it's convoluted. Now it's focused. There's one promise, there's one thing. And then that's, you know, ultimately resolved at the end with a call to action. I think another big part of it is just having the right ingredients for like persuasion, essentially. So we talk about this with mental models, but like there are kind of these psychological hacks and principles that aren't meant to manipulate people. That's definitely like a use for it. You can, you know, apply this however you want to, but really if you're just trying to think, how do I really resonate with my audience? How do I do a better job or the best job that I can of resonating with my audience? You want to include things like social proof, where it's basically you're talking about real life examples of people endorsing you or the work that you've done, or have something nice to say, or basically can vouch for you, right? I think it was I got him Andy. I'm blanking on his name now, but he said that it's marketing when you say it, but it's social proof when your customers say it, right? And so it's basically social proof is when your customers are marketing for you, and then you can leverage what they've said for you. Another huge one has got to be just the clarity over cleverness. I think that a lot of people associate copywriting and writing effectively with like having these quips and jokes and a lot of like really like fancy words and things that, you know, sound nice, or like, you know, have like taglines or the rhymes or things. And really, I think that that's more of like a style piece, and the style really should be dictated on your audience, by your audience. But really, I always try to opt for clarity rather than cleverness, and that I want to be super, super clear so that anyone can understand it. And what I'm saying is absolutely, well understood. This is a huge mistake that I think a lot of SaaS companies make, because you have product people or sort of like corporate people who end up using a lot of jargon, or they end up using, finding like the fanciest, most like vague way of communicating something. And so, the headline of a website will read something like grow your business the right way. And you're like, okay, like, what do you do? So what am I supposed to do with that, right?
Be efficient.
Exactly, right. I mean, there are only so many promises you can make to a person or to a business, but really if you focus on clarity rather than cleverness, we experienced this with SavvyCal as well, where we could have gone with something like the seamless way to manage your schedule or something like that. And I'd be like, okay, is it a calendar? Is it not a calendar? What does it do with my calendar? Yeah. But instead, we really focused on a clear pain point that customers experience, which was the kind of awkward power dynamics that people experience with scheduling links. And I specifically saw that there was a Twitter user who was complaining about Calendly, and they said, I know that I shouldn't, but sending my scheduling link feels weird. And so our headline reads now for SavvyCal, which is one of my main consulting clients. It says, sending your scheduling link shouldn't feel weird. So you want to be super, super clear. Yeah. And that also leads me to one of the other big points, I think, which is just copy paste, or be a copy paster, don't be a copywriter. Use the language literally of your customers. You can use transcripts, you can get email replies, you can look on forums or on social media for kind of these little bits of information. And then you can literally find the language that customers use to describe you. Even like when we launched SavvyCal on Product Hunt, someone wrote a comment, and there all sorts of people had these interesting little like piece of language that we used. Like this guy said that there's an unwritten taboo around scheduling links. We're like, oh, that's amazing. I couldn't have come up with that, like unwritten taboo. This other guy said that there's an awkward dance of finding a time. And I was like, amazing. Like I could have spent, weeks and weeks and weeks trying to come up with like a little funny, quippy, interesting, but very descriptive line like that. But my customer already said it. Now I'm just going to use that. And so if you just use the language of your customers, that also makes it a lot better. So anyways, I think that for writing effective copy, it's really like a lot of it is just an exercise of getting out of your own head and removing yourself as like the problem and just trying to get back to the first principles, getting back to the basics of what makes copy really understandable, what makes copy relatable, how do I inject personality into this, and how can I make this effective in the way that it gets someone to do what I want them to do, whether it's clicking a link, taking action on an ad, booking a demo, or even just replying to an email. So those are some of the big pointers for me.
So if I was to be a little bit more granular on the whole email front, Corey, so like for swipe files, for example, do you find people opening an email more because the subject line was a bit more, attractive, or maybe you had built credibility for swipe files, or do you think it's like a mix of both that kind of increase open rates, for an example?
It's interesting because I actually think that open rates in particular are largely dictated by the sender rather than the subject line or the pretext kind of header. And I think that's because it has a lot to do with the brand and reputation. If people, the welcome email or like the confirmation email are usually like the two most opened emails, usually have like, 80, 90% open rate for sometimes. And then you'll see that there's a pretty good kind of like conversion over to the next email that people receive. And then what you'll find is that there's like a pretty like steady, you find like a plateau, or like your open rate tends to stay around that after that, or there's a steep drop off. Yeah. And if there's a steep drop off after like that second or third email, after the welcome email, you know that you've kind of like lost people's trust that you're sending valuable emails. People are like, oh, this is a bad sender, right? It's kind of like the information that's going on through their brain that they're not audibly saying, but they're like, I don't really like these emails. I think these aren't super valuable. So a lot of it has to do with who is sending this email. I think generally like people and creators and just individual kind of personalities automatically have a higher open rate because it's coming from a person and not like this corporate entity or a brand or a company. So that definitely has a big part of it. But that's not to say that, corporate kind of brands or senders can't have high open rates. It's just that you have to do a lot of work to build up that brand to earn the right to get a high open rate. That said, I still think that obviously subject lines are, important, and a lot of the other parts of the email are important. The sender is definitely a big part of that. But I've actually found that for swipe files in particular, really, really simple and again, clear rather than clever. People definitely go overboard on the clever versus clear thing for subject lines in emails because they want to make like this really quippy thing. I'll just put a subject line like quick question or interesting ... or thought you might like this, or like the story of how X grew. And then like it's very literal, it's very clear. And because I've already built a pretty good reputation of being hopefully having some valuable emails, I usually average around a 50% open rate, which I think is pretty decent. Then it's sort of like no matter what the subject line is, or as long as I'm consistent with my subject line methodology, then I will consistently get a pretty good open rate.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good advice. Especially wanted to ask that question because I remember seeing something today about that someone said, do you still use subject lines saying 5 ways to, do your typical listicle thing? So yeah, that was something I was curious about. So thanks for that, Corey. So yes, emails are obviously one very important part of the whole content process. I do want to focus on things like blogs as well, because that is something like, every SaaS company would have. So for me as a product marketer, sometimes the difficult balance that I'm trying to strike between is like having this sort of blog where I can also offer value, but then also at the same time, I do want to show what my product is saying, but how do I strike that balance so I'm not just giving a sales pitch? So in your opinion and in your experience, what would be the type of blog that would give someone value? Like what can I do to make like product blogs a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think that there's some really strong parallels back to the idea of the sender and the reputation of the sender, and do people associate you with, oh, this is an email that I should open. It's a very similar parallel to blogs of should I click this link and read this blog post, or what is the reputation of the writer or of the blogger, of sort of the content that's being produced on this blog. I think that especially for a lot of SaaS companies in particular, but really at the end of the day, it's pretty much every blog or like company blog that I come across, is that we sort of like devolved into like the blog is just like a place where we throw all of our content, and that's not really like a good strategy, I don't think, because when blogs first started, it was a weblog of writing, right? And that took all sorts of different forms, but usually someone had like a format that they would follow, right? Where it was like a journal, it's a random post, random thoughts, it's a daily kind of log, it's a weekly, it's a monthly log, it's it's educational in some ways, maybe it's very instructional, maybe it's more reviews, for example. And then you come to like a company blog and you find like all sorts of different formats where you have like, here's our Series A announcement, and also here's 5 ways to do X, and also here's an interview with the founder, and also here's a case study. And you're like, well, like there's a lot going on here. And so I think that one of the big things you can do is you can, just from like the blog perspective, you can just create some lanes or some different basically packages of the blog. Maybe you sort of like wrap it all under the umbrella of like a resources or like a learn section. And then you have the blog where it's sort of like thought leadership and instructional content from you and the team. And then you have the company announcements, and then you have the case studies, and then you have the X, Y, and Z other types of content that all sort of live in different folders, for example. And then for each one of those, now you can help people kind of self-select what kind of content that they're looking for. And then I think that'll also, help you with, okay, what type of content is this? Because really the goals for each one of those blogs is going to, the blog post is going to differ based on what type of content it is. For like instructional, educational content, I think that it's really, really important, like you said, to be clear and thorough, and to really do your best job of telling someone how to do something without it being a sales pitch. But also, I think still finding a way to loop in your product. I think the absolute epitome of executing this well is Ahrefs. They have an amazing blog, amazing content, but they use their own product as a lot of the examples of here's how you do this. They also provide a lot of alternatives to, like, they'll make references to, keywords everywhere or ClearScope or other types of, adjacent tools, probably not competitors, or they'll tell you how to do it in Google Analytics or Google Search Console or things like that. But really, they're teaching you how to use their product without being in the product, which then when you go and want to do that thing they're teaching how to do, you're like, oh, I'll just use Ahrefs because, I can see the screenshots right here, right?
Yeah.
And they're showing me how to do this. And that really doesn't take anything away from the content. Now, there are other like listicles where it's like, the 20 best X tools, right? And like you list yourself as number one. And it's like, okay, well, like that's a little bit, forward, right? It's a little bit straight, and you probably wouldn't, put yourself at the end at least, right?
Yeah.
As like a bonus or as like the featured one. But anyways, I think that, especially for like educational, instructional content, which is where most people play it, I think that's one of the best types of content out there. I think that you have to strike a really difficult balance of being thorough, being instructional, but also I would say absolutely, because like, what's the point of creating the content if you're not going to, if you don't want to parlay that back to your product? Otherwise, you're just teaching people how to get away with doing something without your product. And sure, maybe they eventually feel the need, but I think that there's a stronger case to be made for being a little bit more bold and forward in teaching people how to use your product through your blog posts and educational content.
Yeah, cool. So I think maybe for this question, you can maybe draw experiences from like, working at Cogent as well, working on content and stuff. So for a SaaS company that maybe they might have some kind of content strategy in place, or if they don't have one, how would you get started in putting that in place?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I learned earlier on at Cordial, thanks to my friend Benji Hyam at Grow and Convert, which, by the way, Grow and Convert, and I would say Animals are like the two thought leaders in the space around content marketing for SaaS companies. And so those are like the two that I learned the most from, and everything I'm going to say is basically going to be some sort of regurgitation from what they've already done and said at some point. But Benji in particular, I was picking his brain, and he was like, look, you really have to, this is back in, 2017, which I think that we've come a long way since then. But he was like, all of your content needs to be sourced from, or at least involve some sort of customer research. You can't go into a hole, do some keyword research, and then create this like really bland, like unuseful content that doesn't have any sort of like substance to it, doesn't have any like thought leadership, doesn't have any innovative strategies, doesn't really have any, you're just like going through and like teaching yourself along the way and then regurgitating other people's content. Yeah. But if you can leverage customer research, you can basically, they'll do, again, a lot of the writing for you. You just ask them the right questions. And then they'll tell you, hey, these are like the really like winning innovative strategies. Here's something that didn't work for us. Here's something that did work for us. Here was our experience with this thing or how to do that thing. And then from that, right, you can take your more like SEO focused content where you're trying to rank in Google for certain keywords, and you can use customer research to really fill out and beef out and basically create a very, like a 10x piece of content where it's 10x better than everything else because you have a whole new level of specificity and examples and resources and case studies to draw from. Or if you're not going after like keywords and you're more doing like an editorial approach, then you're really trying to tell the stories of your customers or people who aren't your customers, but are, could be our customers or adjacent in some way. And so the customer research is basically a journalism practice where you're just trying to source really good stories, really good examples, and then you're using that as a way to attract the right type of people, loop them into more of the educational content, product content, and eventually get them, looped into the company somehow. And so, now we're going through this process with SavvyCal, having like a content strategy. So the first thing that I did was I did some keyword research. Second thing I did was I went to our users and to our customers. Now we're actually, using freelance writers, and basically the instructions are, here's the list, here's the kind of content we want to create, and here's how we want you to create it, right? So you're using Twitter, you're using users, we'll grab data for you, and we'll do, have like these proprietary kind of reports and pieces here. And so that's how I go about it. It's just really looping a lot of the customers, but also usually finding kind of a balance between more like SEO focused content, and more editorial style content that's better for being shared and referred in social media.
Okay, that actually sounds like a perfect intersection, because you are addressing what people want and you are going with like what's sort of hot and trendy as well. Okay, cool.
Right.
At Baremetrics, Corey, I know you played the role of head of growth. What sort of role did content play in kind of, getting the word out there about Baremetrics and what they did?
Yeah, content was the main driver of growth for us, and was the main kind of acquisition lever that we could pull. I don't remember the exact numbers, but we were doing 5 and 6 figure traffic every month to the blog and to the website, and it was mainly through Google essentially, or it was mainly through referral traffic from other blog posts who referenced one of our blog posts, and or an occasional kind of like social traffic through a new piece that was published, or maybe something got reshared somewhere. But content was huge because, especially for an analytics company like Baremetrics, we had a really strong kind of channel where it was like, what is X? So like, what is MRR, or how to calculate MRR? What is lifetime value? How to calculate churn? How do you improve churn? How do you reduce churn? There's like all sorts of different iterations around basically just answering questions around, what and how, essentially. And then we also had the editorial style. So we would be producing content around our own experiences, what we've learned, experiences from customers, and highlighting, their stories and how they grew, or different things that they've experienced. There was also kind of this, some of our top performing content pieces were around like templates, and sort of like, start to finish, like very instructional. Here's like your SaaS analytics KPIs, or top growth KPIs you want to keep an eye on. Here's a template to keep track of all your metrics. Also, you can just use Baremetrics if you want to. Also, here's how you connect something like Baremetrics to your accounting system and or revenue reconciliation. So like there was a lot in there, and it all directly related back to the product. Especially because then we had additional products like Recover and Cancellation Insights on top of the analytics product.
Right.
And so then we would get into a lot of things around churn and retention, especially. And we were building out a lot of that type of content when I was there. And that also, we were kind of taking a page out of the Ahrefs playbook and talking about, okay, you want to reduce churn, X, Y, and Z. Here's how you do that. Also, you can do X, Y, and Z with Baremetrics Recover, or with Cancellation Insights, so to learn about why customers are canceling, and then send emails and all that sort of jazz. And so, yeah, it was a huge growth lever, and the main driver of traffic and new trials.
Nice. I really like how it was like, mapped, and, you figured out what worked for like each part of the customer journey as well. One final question for you, Corey. So if anyone wants to be like a better writer, obviously content is so important, and making sure that and we know, like, once you figure out what the customer wants, and once you know what the popular keywords are, it's a matter of kind of like putting together, making sure you address those pain points as well. So once now you know that, and when you start writing, what are maybe like 2 things that I could do in order to be a better writer?
2 things you can do to be a better writer is, I would say, go and study other great writing. So build a swipe file, sort of like, some of the origins of swipe files. But really, I think that, as human beings and as kind of these creative creatures, we first usually learn through imitation.
Yeah.
And so it's monkey see, monkey do. Like, if I want to go learn something, I want to see you do it first, and then I'm going to go try to imitate and emulate what you've done. And then through the process, I'll ask questions, and I'll get stuck at some points, and then I'll troubleshoot. But first, I want to see someone else do it. And so if you want to be a great writer, go study great writing, go collect great writing, go try to figure out what makes great writing, depending on just like the emotional kind of reaction that you have towards it. That's how I build my swipe file today. Is I see an ad or a headline or a section on a landing page. I was just doing this the other day, where I was going through some websites on my phone, and I just took screenshots because I thought, oh, this is an amazing section. I love this like new versus old way of doing things section on this landing page. I'm going to take this and learn from this. But like, you can really spend a lot of time dissecting that and thinking, what is it about this that I really like, and just try to be introspective. So that'd be one thing, is just like study great writing. And I would say the other thing is just to get as close to the customer as you possibly can. This is just going to be another kind of regurgitation of what I said earlier, but really, I think that if you can get into the practice of sourcing from real people, it doesn't have to be customers. It can be through services like Haro. There's a new one that was started by my friend Elise called Help a B2B Writer Out. If you can, do some social listening stuff, or search through forums, even if you can just have like a group of people that you source from. Actually, Kaylee Moore, who's like a fantastic writer and a freelance writer, and she teaches a lot of freelance writers. Her thing is whenever she has like a new kind of topic, she goes and finds like the thought leaders on that topic. And then she's like, hey, I'm gonna be writing some articles on this thing. Can I use you as a resource to like build the content? And then she builds up the outline, sends them over a question. They send over like these really detailed answers. I've been on the receiving end of that as well. And then now she has like this really fantastic content to use that she didn't have to create herself.
Nice.
That also makes her a better writer because she's not just making stuff up. She can use the language of people. She can use that as sources. And that ultimately, when you have proof, when you have evidence, when you have real examples, that'll also level up your writing, and building that muscle over time will just make you a much better writer as well.
Oh, thanks a lot for that, Corey. I mean, figuring out like the right sort of content, being like a good writer, and those are like, I think would be like a journey that I think you keep like, learning and perfecting, over time. So thank you so much for taking the time today and answering the questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me.